These are three authors who are pretty much auto book buys for me. They're authors who anything they publish, I will go out there and read it. So it's a thrill to have them here tonight. I'm going to introduce all three of them, and then they will take turns each talking about their latest work. And then I've got lots of questions for them that I'll ask, and also we welcome any of you at that point to ask questions also. So in alphabetical order, we have here tonight Sonali Dave. She writes Bollywood-style romances that have been named Best Books of the Year by NPR, Library Journal, and the Washington Post. And she's here tonight to tell us about Recipe for Persuasion, the second book in a lovely series inspired by the work of Jane Austen. Kwana Jackson also writes under the name K.M. Jackson, and her novel As Good as the First Time, which was published under that name, was a massive favorite with our in-store romance book group. And she's here tonight to tell us about her new book, Real Men Knit, which is the start of a delightful new series set in a Harlem knitting shop. And in addition to being a best-selling author, Sarah MacLean is the host of the Fated Mates podcast and a columnist for the Washington Post. And she is here today celebrating Daring and the Duke, the third book in her Bare Knuckle Bastard series, a series that took Regency romance out of the ballrooms of Mayfair and into the streets of Covent Garden. Please join me in welcoming the three of them.
Thank you.
So Sarah, why don't you go ahead first and tell us a little bit about your new book?
With pleasure. Thank you so much, Northshire, for having me. The last time I was thinking today about the only time I've been in your store. The Saratoga store, what I love about it, you told me when I was there that Saratoga Springs does a Victorian like Christmas walk or something every year. And I've always, since you said that, I've always been sort of, bummed that I've never been invited back for this Victorian Christmas walk. So now I'm like, after COVID, I'm going.
You can come anytime. We have a signing in the store and we would be thrilled to have you for that.
It sounds amazing and exactly up my alley. So yes, I'm Sarah MacLean and I write historical romances, and this book, Daring and the Duke, is the last book in my most recent series, which is called The Bare Knuckle Bastards. And it is book 3 in the series, and the one that I like to think people were either really excited for or really terrified of. This book is a little bit morality chain romance. It's a little bit childhood friends to enemies to lovers romance. It's a little bit, oops, I tried to kill you when you were young, but I'm still in love with you romance. And I have to confess, it was really scary to write because I had sort of backed myself into this very big corner as a writer, which is something that I tend to do in my series. I'd written this big family, or it's not that big, but they feel big. They're emotionally big. There are 3 half-brothers who are all bastard sons of a duke. And the girl who was actually born to the Duchess, she's also an illegitimate child of the Duke. She's an illegitimate child of another man and the Duchess. And she was baptized the Duke. She was baptized a boy, given a boy's name, and essentially raised as a kind of invisible placeholder until their sociopathic, terrible father brought these 3 boys together in a kind of Hunger Games style competition to fight for the role of dukedom, the role of Duke, and the future of the dukedom. And that all happens kind of off page and in like tiny flashbacks through three books. But the boy who actually did become Duke is the villain of the first 2 books of this series. So if you've read Wicked and the Wallflower or Brazen and the Beast, the villain Ewan is the hero of this one. And his heroine is Grace, who was the girl who he essentially, he took her life away from her. I mean, she was a placeholder for him. And they fall in love, surprisingly. Surprising even me as I was writing. But here we are, and the book is out. And if you love morality chain romances the way that I do, I think that it might be an enjoyment for you as a reader. But thanks for having me, Northshire.
Thanks for being here. I have plenty of questions for you, but I think we'll get through every author talking about their books first, and then we'll circle back to questions for everybody. So Kwana, why don't you go ahead and tell us about Real Men Knit?
Oh, okay. I was like, I thought it was going to be Sonali next. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me too. Oh, look at you. Oh, thank you. Oh, we're talking about together. Thanks for having me. I remember you all were kind enough to have me via Zoom. Was it last year? Year before last, maybe? And
2 years.
2 years? Feels like yesterday. Let's go back to that time when we weren't in quarantine. But I'm so happy to be here again. And now I want to come for the Victorian walk. So Sarah, we'll have to take it. We'll go together. We'll have to take a trip. That's right up my alley too.
You are on.
That sounds great. So Real Men Knit is the first book in my Strong Brothers series, and it's the first title under my name, Kwana Jackson, which is actually my real name, so no big secret there. And the Strong Brothers are four. I feel like Sarah is leaving her brothers, and I'm introducing my brothers. It's the four Strong Brothers, and they're four foster turned adoptive brothers of Mama Joy. And no secret, no spoilers given away here. Right at the beginning of the book, Mama Joy suddenly passes away, and she runs a knitting and yarn shop in Harlem. And the brothers have to figure out what to do with her yarn shop. Most of the brothers want to sell, but the youngest brother, Jesse, he is the least likely to want to keep the yarn shop open, and he's fighting with his brothers to keep the shop open and figure out what to do. So this is the story of how they keep the yarn shop open, and the love story of Jesse and Carrie. Carrie is a part-time worker in the shop, and she sort of has found refuge in the shop like most people in the neighborhood, lots of children. Mama Joy has been this wonderful caretaker, not only of her sons, but of lots of people in the neighborhood. And she decides she wants to stick around and help Jesse to keep the shop open, not just because she loves Mama Joy, but she has secretly been in love with Jesse for quite a while too. And Jesse is a bit of a player, and he knows it. He may have secretly had feelings for Carrie too, and doesn't feel he's worthy of her. So this is their story, sort of a childhood friends to lovers romance. And I hope everybody gets to know the Strong Brothers and love them as much as I do. So there's Jesse, there's Lucas, there is Noah, and there is Damien. They're all very different, all different ethnicities, and I think they're all fantastic. So this is the first in the series.
Thank you, Kwana. Sonali, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about Recipe for Persuasion?
Thank you. Oh. With all my little... Oh, this is actually my Jane Austen bookmark from Jane Austen's Charlton but we'll talk about that later. So it feels like, did you guys notice that that Jesse and Carrie and Grace and Ewan and Ashna and Rico are all childhood loves, getting another chance.
We all have a lot in common, I've noticed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even setting wise, they're really interesting settings. So yes. All right. So this is the second in my series. The first was Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors. And this one is Recipe for Persuasion. So no points for guessing what the series is trying to do. But it was a childhood dream of mine, for real, to write all of my favorite Jane Austen stories, which is 4 of them, under one story umbrella. So, when we dream in front of the mirror, like you do your Oscar speeches and your Grammy speeches in the shower and in front of the mirror, this was before I even knew anyone would ever publish a book I wrote. I kind of thought, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to write these 4 Austen novels under one story umbrella? I wonder if anyone else has ever done it. And I'm sure people have done it because there are no original ideas, but it was this dream, and so it's actually happening. But Recipe for Persuasion is the story of Ashna, who is one of the Raji cousins. This series follows a politically ambitious Indian American family in the Bay Area. The oldest cousin is running for California governor, and that kind of is the arc of the series, where it kicks off when he announces his gubernatorial candidacy, and it will end when the election results come out. So the whole series is kind of set during his campaign. And this is the story of Ashna, who is one of the cousins, and she is trying to save her dead father's failing restaurant. It used to be, it used to be this fancy, very successful restaurant in her father's day. And for the past 10 years, it's been sinking slowly under her watch. And in a last ditch effort to save it, she goes on a Food Network show called Cooking with the Stars, which is Dancing with the Stars, but with chefs and celebrities. And of course, the celebrity she gets stuck with is a World Cup winning football/soccer star, who happens to be the boy she dumped in high school. And he believes that she dumped him under familial pressure, which is kind of, where the whole inspired by persuasion thing comes in. So it is a story of second chances. It's I think, not just a love story between Ashna and Rico, but between Ashna and her mother. So there's this, so Ashna's backstory is the fact that she's been abandoned by her mother. And the thing that I was trying to explore here is, growing up in India, the stories that surrounded me were often the arranged marriage trope, as it happened in Bollywood films and in the stories of my childhood, had to do with this concept that you're forced into marriage to a man you did not desire. And if, so this whole lemon and lemonade thing. So if you put your head down, complied, if you opened yourself up to how wonderful he really is, wonderful things will happen and you will find happiness in the end. And it would really bother me, because it went with all these other messages that I was getting, which is that your family knows what's best for you better than you. The elders know what's better for you than yourself. And I thought that it was such a clever way to take agency away from women, and to kind of tell them that when you comply, you make everyone happy and therefore find happiness. So this whole narrative that women as mothers must sacrifice, as wives must sacrifice. So true happiness for women comes when you sacrifice what you desire. And I feel like what I learned from Jane Austen, one of my greatest lessons very young, because I read her very young, was about self-worth. Because at a time when nobody else even thought that self-worth in women could be said in the same sentence, she wrote female characters who were able to say, you might be the 8th richest man in England, and my choice might be destitution, but I choose destitution because you're a jerk. So that kind of self-worth was something that was completely not something I had come across in stories before I read Pride and Prejudice. So to me, these books are really the lessons I learned. So they're not retellings scene by scene. They're not plot retellings. What they are is what personally, as a woman, as a little girl growing up, I learned from Jane Austen's stories, inspired into stories of my own. Or woven into stories of my own. So essentially, Shobhi, who is Ashna's mother, is that woman who says, no, I will not do that. She's forced into a marriage with Ashna's father, who is a prince. And she says, no, I will not comply. This is not the man I'm in love with. And I will not put my head down for everyone else's happiness and crush my own desires. And the collateral damage is Ashna, as there often is collateral damage. And that's what we're told. Oh, everyone's going to be miserable. The children will be miserable if you demand a better marriage. And, everybody will be miserable if you don't sacrifice. And Shobhi actually says no. And of course, everything they tell us is true, and destruction ensues. And Ashna is a large, is basically all of that destruction. And so it really is a second chance for that woman. I really wanted to write a woman who makes that decision. What they say will happen happens, but she gets over that bump and finds happiness. And so it is these two women who find their way to each other and therefore are able to heal enough to then let happiness into their lives.
Fantastic, thank you. So I have a lot of questions for the three of you. I'm guessing the audience does too, so everyone please feel free to use the chat function at any time to put in a question that David and I can ask, but I'm gonna kick things off with a general question for the three of you, which is, romance has always been a genre, it's always been popular, but it's also a genre that people really turn to in hard times. And I, in the last little while as a bookseller, and have been having a lot of people come to me saying, hey, I just started reading romance. Where should I go? Where should I start? What should I read? What blog should I follow? So I wondered if the three of you have any advice or thoughts for people who are just starting out in the world of romance of what they should go to.
Oh, that's a hard one.
I asked because I've been stumped by the question.
That's a hard one. Yeah. I feel like right now you have to sort of, I want to say, go to like-minded friends for recommendations, because I would be careful to send people to the wrong place, because opinions are so, people have such definite opinions about things, and if you send them to the wrong place and they're not, you send them, say, to the wrong blog or to the wrong reviewer or the wrong person, they might get the wrong idea about romance and then just get completely turned off. You know, sometimes you go online and you go on Twitter and you go somewhere and some of the opinions are so strong and it just turns people off, and I get really, the things seem so definite, and I'm just like, oh no, that's just not the right idea about romance, and so it's a little scary. I'm gonna defer to the other authors on this one. So, you know, it's sort of like, you know, I feel very protective over the genre. So I want to, you know, I want to be careful. Maybe send them to, if you know of any booksellers who really care about the genre, I would send them that way, where people can talk to them really carefully and question them as to, you know, what are you reading and what do you like? What do you even like to watch? And steer them that way. So now I'm going to go to Sarah and to Sonali on this, because you really have to, you know, be careful. Like, be like, well, what movies are you watching? You know, I sort of go that way. It's like, and say, well, what are you reading? Well, I read thrillers, and say, okay, so I can, you know, introduce you to some romantic suspense people. That's how I go with my non-romance reading friends. And I say, well, how about this person? And I steer them like that, because some people are, you know, you just get such definite opinions and then it just goes off the rails. So now I'm going to just toss it over.
I'm much less patient than you, Kwana. I mean, I always have an issue with anyone who comes at it with prejudice, first and foremost. I mean, why is anyone even asking that question, right? And it's why do you read other stuff? Like, why are you reading mystery? Why are you reading, to me, and people are different. So I really have no interest in trying to change someone's mind if they are stupid enough to think that a genre that puts out hundreds of books a week is a monolith, you know? So for me, it's like, if you're coming at it with a preconceived notion, I'm, you know, good for you. You don't deserve to read.
But if they're actually coming to you and looking for a recommendation and looking for romance, and they're not a romance reader, okay, then they're wanting it. You know what I mean? I'm thinking of it, they're wanting a recommendation and they're wanting help, and they're like, well, where do I go? Where do I start? You know? So say it's a friend of my husband's who has read, you know, Real Men Knit, because now he's recommending it to all his lodge guys, which he
Which I
nicely
love.
has. And they're like, okay, what do I do? I've never, you know what I mean? You know, where do I go online to look for these things? I want to say, well, what have you been reading? What do you like to read? They're like, I only read the Sunday paper. I only read sports. They might say, I only like the Knicks. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so maybe I have to let's start with some great sports romances or something. I want to see what they like. They don't have this idea that romance is horrible because they've tried it, you know.
And then they deserve the the genre. But okay, so
You said they deserve the genre. That's so cute. Then they
because I
deserve
feel
the genre. They deserve the privilege of reading it.
truly people who have a chip on their shoulder, in my opinion,
Yes, I have
if
no
you
patience
don't
for that. I
enjoy
understand
something
what you're
that has
saying. Yes,
emotions, if you don't enjoy something that has heightened emotions, that's about emotional growth, that is about
I get you.
agency. If you don't, if you want to see someone shot in chapter 1 and want to spend the rest of that book figuring out who shot that person, then I mean, maybe romantic suspense, but romance is not
Yeah.
for you,
Yes, no,
but
that's
I
fine
feel
too.
like
I
it's,
can enjoy that.
and I think the biggest thing I would do to someone who is kind of trying to dip their toes in this thing is to first and foremost tell them it's not a monolith, right? I mean, if you it's
Mhm.
you have everything from the boom boy meets girl, and and exactly what traditional whatever 70s romances, you can find those emotional hits today. um,
Mhm.
and you can find completely community based, a person trying to find themselves in a community of so something that is that leans more toward character work rather than just
Sure.
so you have every I think every ethnicity you can get into, family sagas, the entire crime dramas, like all of that, and Kwana is absolutely right. I think it is about what is it that attracts you to reading, and what is it that attracts you to a story, and a lot of it then has to do with, and you could always go to Sarah MacLean. She could literally pull out a
Well,
story. Like I could say
yeah,
to
I
Sarah,
would send them to.
I, wait,
I can send them to Sarah's, to Sarah's site,
Send
and
me
she could help.
he can tell you, like you
I
can go
can
to
send them to
Sarah and
Sarah,
say,
who writes about it beautifully. I would send them. I would feel comfortable send them to Sarah's, but there are a few places on the web you do not feel comfortable sending people to.
you're
Well,
right.
I think that the amazing thing about romance, Tessa Bailey, who's fabulous,
Yes.
she likes to say, I love the way that she comes at this, because she likes to say the best thing about romance novels is that when you wake up in the morning, you can say to yourself, you can ask yourself, who do you want to be today? Who do I want to be today?
Absolutely.
And how do I get to win? How do I get to live that person's best life? And the answer is read a romance novel about that person. And romance is so massive, and there are so many books that it really is like, do you want to read a book about a person, scaling a volcano in the 1980s? I got you. Like, do you want to read a space prison romance? I got you. Like, so I think that what's amazing about romance is we are such a huge pool, and there is room in it for everyone. So there is room in it for every reader. And so Kwana and Sonali are absolutely right. You start, of course, with what's your favorite thing,
What's
right?
your thing? What are you looking for,
But also, look, I mean, not to plug myself, but first of all, yes, you can absolutely tweet me at Sarah MacLean, and I'll give you a rec. And I have a list of 250 romances that I really love on my website. Both Kwana and Sonali are on that list.
Thank you.
But also there's, I have a podcast that comes out every Wednesday called Fated Mates, and it's designed to topple your TBR pile with romance novels. So I think
in your pocket.
And I
mean, like one click.
If I could literally if I could have any job, including romance writer, my job, I want the job where I just like hand people romances all day long and say, read this.
It's not a bad job. That's a pretty good job.
I have to point out that what I'm always most amazed, I'm amazed about a lot of things Sarah does, but you can literally go to Sarah and say, I'm looking for a romance. about a girl who likes the color red, and a guy who doesn't like people who like colors, and she will be like, in
If that's not
2013.
done, somebody should really write that. If that is not done, that sounds like really good romance, actually, doesn't it?
I mean,
I don't
it's
like people who
amazing.
like colors.
A girl who loves the color red and a guy who really doesn't like colors.
But what I mean is just like the exposure and just she's like this bank of this database of romance novels ever written. It's amazing. It's a thing of beauty.
It's literally my only skill, but also,
An amazing.
it's honestly, it's just because I come at romance as a reader first, like first, last, always. All I want to do is read romance novels all the time. It's why my books are always late. But I mean, at least I'm good at I'm doing the procrastination on my end, but I'm calling it work for all of you. So
Thank you.
You're out there, you're doing the good work, you're spreading the good word.
And if you ever need a guest slot as a bookseller to come tell people about I think that could be your calling.
Instead of signing at the Victorian Walk, can I come in costume and just sell books, like sell romance novels?
Sure,
right.
Yep, you're on.
She's like the official joy spreader. I'm spreading joy and love. Here you go.
The time that you came to visit the store, I remember walking away with a giant stack of books from our own romance section that had not been on my radar, that I wound up buying for myself.
That's my favorite thing, like finding people in the romance section and then filling their arms with them and then walking away like a fairy.
Your favorite thing is that. My favorite thing, is telling people off who call it trash. But so to each his own. I'm like, excuse you. My favorite thing is excuse you.
So I have a question that's specifically for Kwana. It's good, don't worry, it's a good thing. One of the things that I really loved about Real Men Knit is the way you sort of, the best big city neighborhoods function very much like small towns. And you saw that, and you took sort of the beats of a classic small town romance, and you moved that to Harlem, which is in its own way a small town.
Very much.
And I wondered how much you were thinking about the sort of the world of small town romances, the sort of category romances, small town romances, as you were structuring and creating this series.
The short answer is not too much, which people are like, okay, that's strange, but it's not really strange. But because I'm born and raised in Harlem, born in Midtown Manhattan in Roosevelt Hospital, which is no longer there, but like right there in Midtown Manhattan. I'm like, I tell people I bleed New York, but honestly, I kind of think I do bleed New York. I'm like New York through and through. So Midtown Manhattan at Roosevelt Hospital. So, and then right uptown to Harlem where I lived. I'm a projects girl. As far as I went, most of my life was to Washington Heights. And then for high school, down to the Village to Stuyvesant. And that was pretty much my whole world most of my life. And now I live in Westchester, right outside of Yonkers, and would not move further north because I was like, my family calls this upstate where I live. And we're seriously 25 minutes outside of the city. And they're like, you live so far upstate. Now my family that's in Harlem still. So Harlem, and most of the places in every borough in New York, to me, is pretty much its own little small town. My grandmother used to, she was Nana. My Nana would call it was the Village of Harlem. It's now called fancy smancy on the news. It's Hamilton Heights. I don't know what that is. I don't know. I don't know what Hamilton Heights is. It's Harlem to me. But it was called the Village of Harlem. And the Harlem that I write about in Real Men Knit is the Harlem that I grew up with. So when people say you write it like a small town, it was and is a small town to me. It still is because most of my people are there. So when I wrote it, it just sort of came out that way. I wrote about a small town in Sugar Lake that I made up, but that's just sort of the way I grew up. It's just everything is just sort of very villagey, very small. And I think that's just how it is when you go to Washington Heights. That's just, you can be in New York And after you leave your small little 10-block radius, it's like you're in a whole nother world. You leave Harlem, you go up a little bit to Washington Heights, it's a whole different feel. You go down further to Midtown, it's a whole different feel. Brooklyn to me is a whole nother world. I would, to get a Harlem girl to venture to Brooklyn, Sarah's making a face because she knows it's like, wow, that's a whole different thing. The Bronx is a very different feeling. And Brooklyn is a huge borough. I mean, it's a city. It's a whole different city. So there's a lot of small towns in Brooklyn, is what I'll say. So it really wasn't a sort of mental writing effort to make it feel that way and to sort of give it those small town people kind of feels, because that's just the way Harlem is. It's sort of like everybody knows everybody knows everybody's business, everybody raises everybody's children, just like in any other small town in the USA. It's just that you've got bigger buildings, more traffic, and a different sort of transit system, is what I'll say.
It was really delightful, and it reminded me of a couple of city neighborhoods that I've lived in, and was not something I remembered seeing in romance before. So it was something that was delightful. If you have other recommendations that are similar, I'm listening.
I think there are other. I think the difference with Real Men Knit and other books, maybe city set books, which would kind of annoy me a little bit. And maybe they were written by authors who were not exactly from New York. If you get a book from an author who is not from, who maybe lives in New York, or maybe moved to New York, you're gonna get a different feel. I think that's what, I think the difference with Real Men Knit and me writing, this is the writing about where I actually was born and raised and grew up, and not writing outside of my actual home. That, I think that's the difference in feeling. You know how it's like, I remember reading a book and the writer sort of wrote, okay, it took, an hour and a half to get from Midtown to Bronxville, when it takes 20 minutes to get from Midtown to Bronxville on the Metro Road. Something like that will drive me insane. I think that's the difference. So I can't give you a recommendation that with the exact same thing, feeling. You sort of got to get that. It's that hometown thing, sort of like that Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil feelings. Like you've got to be right in the setting, having been raised there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Sonali, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about Jane Austen. When I first saw that this series was coming, I mean, I was just over the moon of excited. I've admired your work for a long time. I, of course, love Jane Austen. She's so universal, and she's a writer who, her work has been adapted and transformed so many times into so many different cultures. And I wondered if you have thoughts, and this might be too much of a tough question, but on why she is so universal, why her work can be adapted in so many ways and work so perfectly every time.
Okay, first, thank you. I'm no scholar, because when you say Jane Austen scholar, there's about 20,000 of them in the world, and they all go to the Jasna conference, where when you go, and if you presume to say anything about it, they will say to you, but in the letter she wrote to her third brother Edward in 1814 on page 5 in line 7, and okay, so so that's how much she endures to this day. And yeah, I mean, I spoke at their summer program last year, and I was like, y'all are crazy. So it was a little bit, it's a lot. I will say that, and I said this before, I think when I was explaining the book, to me, she was just a very large personal influence. So growing up reading her young, and I think that's the magic of it, is the fact that I think all of us are naturally born with something inside us, and it has to find reinforcement and vindication in the real world. And that's why I think stories are so important, right? So if you have a deep belief that happiness is possible, or if you have a simple deep belief that you are worthy of finding love, right? One of the reasons people who read romance, have this one universality about them, it's because they believe that. And when they read our books, that's reinforced, that anyone can heal, that everybody is worthy of happiness, right? So those things that you believe deeply, I think you're attracted, what we were talking about, introducing people to genres. I think some of your basic beliefs are automatically, you gravitate towards certain stories. And the best, I think, writers or the best storytellers are the ones who can speak specifically to one individual, even if it is millions of individuals, right? And I feel like what is in her stories is so simple, and speaks so simply to all the stuff we naturally believe, which is that the world we live in is ridiculous. You don't always have to believe everything that's being told to you, right? I mean, all of us grew up knowing this is not right. This uncle or that aunt or this grown up is telling me that if I make a face, my face will get stuck. But all children know that's not true. I mean, and so that the things you're told are ridiculous, and that the world you live in is ridiculous, which is why I think her whole comedy of manners thing is so appealing, is that she lives in this world. Her characters behave in accordance with the rules of that world, but they don't always agree with those rules. So even as she is telling the story of Lizzie Bennet being a really good woman by the rules of that time, she doesn't actually buy into everything that world is about, and same for Anne Elliot, and which is why she kind of knows she's done something wrong by listening, right? And so she knows that she wants to fix it. And so those things that we do, we all get persuaded. We all know, that the world we live in is ridiculous. We all know we have self-worth, right? We all know we should be able to say no to the 8th richest man in England if he is not worthy of us, right? And so I think that those things which are so simple that she said so clearly, I think that those are the things that make her endure. I think it's just basically that, because when you go back and you read, I mean, if you read Wuthering Heights, what does that tell you? Right? That if you're a woman and you desire something, you're going to end up dead and crazy, and then in the afterlife, you're going to continue to be miserable and crazy. And so, or things like if you fall in love with a brown man, that's going to happen to you, when a white man is available. And it's, so it's all these things, which actually, probably is the only important thing that was said in Wuthering Heights. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a beautifully written book. I think some of the most romantic lines in the world that I have read are in that book. But what it tells you about human beings is awful. What it tells you about the world is awful. And so while it still endures, nobody goes like, Wuthering Heights changed me, or I think about Wuthering Heights in my dreams. And people do that with, I think, Jane Austen. And it is because I think of the of the simplicity of what she said. And it was timeless, because things like self-worth are timeless. And amazingly, society has not changed. She also, I think, wrote specifically about divisions in society. Right? Divisiveness and this need of human beings to be better than others, right? So what sets me apart as a higher and you a lower? And she was talking to that all the time. And I feel like our world, as much as it has changed, has found subtle and subtler, more invisible ways to do that. And so again, that's one of the reasons I think she endures.
Great. Wuthering Heights is one of those books that whenever we mention it on social media, it's like absolutely love it or hate it. It inspires the most passionate debates. I'm going to go ahead and ask one question of Sarah, and then audience, I would encourage you guys, if you have questions for the authors, to go ahead and ask them in the chat, or if you want to ask on camera and be part of the recording for YouTube, just let myself or Davith know in the chat that you'd like to ask a question on camera. But before that, Sarah, one of the things that I really admire about the Bare Knuckle Bastard series is that you sort of chose to throw away a lot of the shared shorthand in Regency romances that, you know, sort of that sandbox that was created by Georgette Heyer, while you still kept a lot of the best tropes. And it feels like, you know, sort of watching your work evolve over time, you know, that's been sort of something that you've been tinkering on the edges of more and more over time. And I was wondering if you could talk about that process for yourself as a writer.
That's a good one. So I think it's twofold. You're absolutely right. And I did kind of overtly throw away a lot of the stuff that historicals, particularly Regencies, are known for. I kind of threw out ballrooms and, you know, elaborate gowns and the aristocracy largely, and without sort of giving anything away. Like I sort of, the whole series is designed and was designed from conception to ask a question about what we value as noble and why we choose certain things, why we label certain things noble. What is the difference between being noble with a capital N and having nobility as a person? And what it means to act with nobility. And so but I have been dancing around the edge of this for many years. I mean, my second series was all about criminals, right? They all sort of, well, weren't really criminals, criminal-esque. They owned a casino and, you know, did all sorts of things. And I'm just really interested. I find that as I get older and as the world evolves around me, I become less and less interested in the idle rich. But I continue to love the trappings of historicals. I love the cinematic pieces of historical romance. Like for me, being able to write a casino in the 1830s, or being able to write the rooftops of London without light pollution, or, you know, there's something really great about that. Historicals give you, when you write historicals, you're able to really remove your story from, it's a little bit of a cheat, right? Because you can remove your story from the trappings of the world that you live in every day and really tell a fantasy while still kind of establishing it in a society that's familiar in some ways to many of us. So, you know, where I love, for example, like Robin Lovett's, you know, Planet of Desire books are fantastic and so great, but they're, you know, true fantasies kind of set on on like a space planet. So for me, I think historicals give you that opportunity to tell a different kind of story and paint a different kind of fantastical picture. And so, yes, part of it is that I got tired of writing rich people in ballrooms. So now when I put a ballroom on the page, it's so that, you know, things can blow up in it. Like, meaning like the aristocracy can blow up in it. And that's really fun for me. And that's what, interestingly, I mean, now I sort of feel like it's, now, you know, everyone in this Zoom knows that like this is my core story in some way, and like what's coming in Hell's Bells, which is the next series for me, which is a 4-book series about a Victorian girl gang, is a lot more of this kind of like how women wield power in the aristocracy, what it means to pull power from the aristocracy and use it for good beyond it. And I think that in 2020, we could all do a little more like thinking about how we can act with nobility and sort of look at money in a different way. Obviously, like we can't throw out money, but like, you know, billionaires should look a little different now than they have maybe in the past. And so for me, that's what this series and probably the arc of my career for the foreseeable future is. And then maybe I'll come back to billionaires. And I should say, I still love a Duke. Like, for sure, there's going to be a Duke in the next series, but I want Dukes who are aware of what that all means.
Very cool. There's a great question from Nikki to start things off from the audience questions in the chat. She asked all of you, what's a trope that you love to read but aren't even a little bit interested in writing?
What?
Not interested. That's hard.
That's hard. It's like, I feel like not even a little interested in writing. I'm such a trope lover. This is so hard. I love so many tropes. I'm not a fan of things that are too sweet. So if you throw out really sweet tropes, but I just did childhood sweetheart, so that's kind of hard and that's kind of sweet.
You know what?
But they're always arguing, so yeah, that's hard.
Mine is probably Secret Baby. I'm a sucker
Oh,
for
that's
Secret Baby story. I really am. Like, I
don't
love
know how I could write a sweet
story.
Secret Baby. You're right. You're right. Mm-hmm.
I love that moment where he discovers that she's been pregnant, like that she's had a baby and it's his, and he looks at it and the baby has the same eye color as him. And he's like, oh my God, what happened? And she's like, it's not your baby. It's somebody else's baby. It's my nephew. Like, I love all that mess. I love it, but I would probably never write it.
Yeah. You know what? I think you might have hit it. I will read a Secret Baby, but I don't know if I could write a Secret Baby. I don't.
I won't even read it. Like, I won't even. That's like such a trigger for me.
No, I
think there are circumstances under which I might read it, but the idea of someone keeping a child from a parent is such a trigger for me. You really have to sell it. Like, you have to, for personal reasons. I feel like anyone who keeps a child from it literally is like this thing where I just want to hunt this woman down and, and put her in jail or something. I'm like, how dare you? You don't keep a child from her father. And, it's just like, so yeah, it would have to be danger to the child.
I'm sitting here trying to think of the Secret Baby challenge now. It's like Secret Baby challenge, how to do it the right way. That's a hard one. But
historical. It's always like he left. He did something.
He left. Yeah, he did something really horrible.
Like, screw that guy.
You don't want to share it. He's not worthy of he's not worthy of being a father. That's the way you do it, because he's not worthy. He's such a horrible guy.
Right.
And he's not worthy. You would not have, you think he's really just
so it's a redemption story. She didn't hide it. That's a redemption story. She didn't hide it. He went away. It's like knowingly hiding. That's the problem.
In the age of text messages, it feels much harder.
And I feel like, yes, if there's danger involved for the child, like you fell in love with the guy from
you fell in love with the total crap. You see him, you see him murder someone. Picture this. You see this guy that you just had the best sex of your life with, right? You think he's so fantastic, but then you see him murder someone. Then you're like, oh my God, he's a murderer. Okay, we're gonna make this quick. I want to read
that book.
You think so you're like, oh my God, he's a murderer, and I just found out I'm pregnant.
But he had a fine reason.
But then it turns out, you find out later when the baby's 5 that he had a fine reason for it. Okay, there's a secret baby.
Or he didn't actually kill anyone. You just thought that happened.
You just thought that happened. There's your secret baby story.
There you go.
I guess I can write a secret. I guess I can write a secret baby story.
And I guess I'll read it with Kwana Jackson.
I don't want to. You've now all seen me plot out a secret baby story, but I really don't know if I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I will read it if Kwana writes it. If Kwana writes, I'll read anything.
Yeah, that's usually the reason. That's probably the reason. That's the only plausible reason. It's got to be some horrible mistake to make it work. Otherwise, there's no reason to keep the secret baby kind of thing. Yeah. Some really tragic illness kind of thing or something like that. It's got to be a real tragedy.
It's a hard one, though. It's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah. I look forward to hosting you all for this new book. I'm excited about it. We've got another great question here from Marta in the chat, and she's just wondering what all of you are reading right now.
Oh, I'm gonna go because I am gonna make everyone.
I'm gonna go.
You can go for all of us.
Go,
I am
please,
reading
go for all of us.
Joanna Shoup's new book that no one else can get. So.
Oh, you know what? He's fancy.
It pays to make friends with Joanna, because then you get to read her books early. But that's what I'm reading, and it's delightful. It's so good.
I'm so jealous. I love her books so much. She's the best.
Has she ever written anything that's not delightful? I was unable to read. Like, I was unable to read when this whole COVID thing started. And then her new one, Downtown, Devil of Downtown. And fortunately, again, she's a dear friend, and I got that early, and I could read again, you know?
She is so good. She is probably, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say I think Joanna is the best historical writer writing today. So if you have not read her current series, which is the Uptown Girls series, which is basically like, imagine the Schuyler sisters from Hamilton, but drop down in like 1890s Gilded Age New York City, and then they like
I'm dying to read
go
this
downtown
now.
And they like smooch a bunch of criminal men who don't deserve them and then like break them down and then rebuild them in the image of like men who deserve them, and it is totally brilliant.
I'm dying to read this.
Delicious. And one of my favorite things about Devil of Downtown is what Kate Claiborne said about it. That it truly is the Devil of Downtown, if you know what I mean.
That's true. That's the truth.
She is. I totally agree. And if you haven't read Devil of Downtown, I'm saying that right? Because
Devil of Downtown.
It's the pink cover, and it just came out, and it is just absolutely delicious, because I think that this sister is my favorite, the youngest, Felicity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so she was my favorite of the three Green sisters, and she's a do-gooder. She is. I'm such a sucker for the whole nobility. Like, what is, I think the single reason that I read or write is to explore that. Like, what is goodness, right? What is true goodness, and what are actions versus words, right? You talking up a good game versus actual good actions, and that is, I think, anytime that's explored in a story, you have me. And and it's really lovely, because she is these heroes run gambling dens, and they're absolute criminals, and they're she convinces you that they're good men, and that's something, because something somewhere, that little seed of goodness, these women find and then grow a tree, baby.
I'm reading Sarah's right now.
Oh, thanks.
My secret thing, which maybe one day I'll get to do, is to write a historical.
Please do. I want to read that.
I'd like to write. Well, maybe one day. One day.
Where would you set it, Kwana?
Where would I set it?
Like New York set?
Probably New York, because yeah. Where would it? Probably New York, because I do everything in New York. I'd have to start with where I know, so probably New York.
Yeah, you should write. You know what you should write? You should write Harlem Renaissance. It's hometown historical.
I should one day. And well, I talked to you a million years ago. Well, I actually did start. It's so many thousand words, where it's just got something in France and that sort of past present thing, and I have to finish that. So yeah, but yeah. So yours, I sort of just started, and I'm already in love. So that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I'm not going to tell you guys what I'm reading, because it's a literary novel I'm at 30%, and I feel like I've been at 30% for the past.
Oh no, don't tell us. Don't share.
It's not bad. Somebody was like, this is so good. And I was like, yeah, it is actually good, but it is not.
You're like, it is actually good, but it's not doing it.
It's not moving. It's not moving.
It's not moving for me.
I will say that if you have not read Alexis Hall's Boyfriend Material yet, that is,
Yes.
I think it's one of my favorite rom-coms
Oh,
ever.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
Oh,
supposed
you
to
said
write
boyfriend. I have to share my other boyfriend. You said
And-
Alexis Hall. I'm going to share the Boyfriend
Sarah.
Project. Farah Rashan's Boyfriend Project. That's my other favorite book. I have it on my shelf.
That book is amazing, and Farah is amazing. But yes, definitely.
I want to read Alexis Hall's book. I've heard such good things about it.
And I'm reading. So Queen Move, Kennedy Ryan's Queen Move came out the day that Recipe for Persuasion came out, and I so it's been on my Kindle since then, and her last series, the Kingmaker series, was I think one of my favorite romance series ever. What Kennedy is able to do in terms of make this, I think Sarah said it best. What you said about when you start reading those books, you know she's hunting big game. Like that is
Kennedy can,
spot on.
so she grabs you from the very beginning, and
First-
you're like, first
big.
lines, and you're sucked right in. Yes,
And it's saga, right? Like it's
Yeah.
saga at line
Yes.
level. And
absolutely.
and what I love is it has old world romance feels and completely contemporary subject matter. So you are, you're in this meaningful space from the first page on, but you have this complete escapist like romance thing going on. So she's able to do that, both those things. It's amazing.
Her books like feel like she's filling out space in the genre, like places where romance has not been.
Yeah.
Kennedy is writing in these like remarkable spaces that feel like saga, like Sonali
That's
said, but
wonderful.
also like it's so clear that she has such deep abiding respect for the genre, and like she has a long standing love of it. It's so clear. When I first met her, I was like, you love Laura Kinsale, and she was like, I do love Laura Kinsale.
Yeah.
She's another one of my special my superpowers is being able to tell a writer which old writer they loved when they were children.
That's so funny.
But Kennedy's books are they're just transforming the way romance is right now.
Yeah. She's the canvas, like everything about it, the prose level, the canvas, the subject matter, all of it is just, it's tremendous. There's no other word for it.
So we are just about out of time, sadly, because I could go on all night. But I wondered if the three of you would just wrap things up by giving us little teasers. Sarah, you sort of already did, but maybe a little more about what is coming next from you. So tell us a little bit more about either what you're working on or what your next release will be after these.
So my next series is called Hell's Bells. And if you have read or are planning to read Daring and the Duke, you have met the Bells. It's a Victorian era girl gang loosely based on a real Victorian era girl gang. And they are both, they sort of straddle the line between the aristocracy and the criminal worlds and sort of the darker worlds that I've been creating. So anybody who reads my books knows that I'm immensely lazy, and so I like to build like a huge, I don't start new series, I just build out the current world that I've been building for however many years. And so you will see the Bare Knuckle Bastards in this series, you will see the Scoundrels and their casino in this series, you will go back, we will see the Soiled S's, the sisters from Scandal and Scoundrel in this series. Each of the four heroines are loosely based, or not loosely based, they are sort of, I want to play with archetypes, like historical romance archetypes. So there's the Scandal, the Wallflower, the Scandal, the Spinster, the Blue Stocking, and the Duchess. And the tagline for the series, I think we're official, is the edge of the ballroom has the best stories, or the best view and the best stories. See, I need to get it all right. The edge of the ballroom has the best view and the best stories. So I don't want to give away too much, but you at least know one of the couples already. And you'll have met all of the Bells by the time you finish Daring and the Duke.
Exciting.
Kwana?
Should I
Kwana, do
go
you
next?
want to go? Or is it
Sure,
you?
I'll go next. For me, I have two things coming up next year. I just finished book 2 in the Strong Brother series. So the next brother coming up is Lucas Strong, if you've read Real Men Knit. So Lucas is our firefighter brother. And I say poor Lucas. Poor Lucas is going through some things. And so he's got, I don't want to say who his heroine is, whether we've met her or not. I'm not even going to say that. So, but we'll just say he's got a lot he's going through. Each of my brothers have to go through their own grieving process. Even though they're romantic comedies, they're still dealing with a lot in life and things like that. So Lucas is going to go through his things, and he's a firefighter. He's strong. All my brothers knit. He's knitting right along with his brothers. So we've got him knitting in Harlem, doing his thing. And I've just put his story not to bed. It's with the editor. So it's long from going to bed. Let's just say that. But it's turned in for now, so it's off my plate. So we've got Lucas coming out next year, and I am starting on another story for Forever, which is called How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days. So that is a whole different thing and a lot of fun. And so I am working on that. So yeah, so I've got two things happening next year, and that's going to be under KM Jackson. So look for both of those happening.
I'm waiting for both of those, but the way the Keanu story came together was just the most amazing.
The Keanu story, I'll say briefly, came together honestly by me just seeing a tweet about which is probably not going to happen just because of COVID and things like that. I saw a tweet go by saying that The Matrix and John Wick might be coming out on the same day, honestly, just from a tweet. And me thinking and tweeting out loud, I said, oh, don't put your book out on Keanu Day unless it's that How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days novel. And I hit send. And then I was like, did I just think of a novel? And that's pretty much how it came about. I was like, I think I did. I should call my agent about that.
Yeah,
every woman of Generation X is like signing up to pre-order that right now.
and that's how we're going to get that secret baby story too. That's how Kwana plots.
Oh yeah, yeah. My agent was like, you really talk a lot on social media. Maybe you should hold those ideas. I was like, but hey, this is a really good one this time.
It was a good one, and it was just like that editor was so smart to just be like, I want that.
Yeah.
So my next one is the Sense and Sensibility book, and it is today I think we have a title, and I madly love this title. I'll tell you what it's about first and then tell you the title, and it'll make more sense. So it is the story of the cousin who's running for governor. So it's Yash's story, for those of you who've been reading. And Yash is a person who's basically had his life laid out for him, always known what he's wanted, has never had a moment of doubt, is this seemingly perfect, completely comfortable with himself character. And he's up on, which of course is not true because, stories and romance. And so he is at a rally, and he gets shot at, and his bodyguard takes a bullet for him and ends up in a coma. And that just shatters everything he's ever believed. And suddenly he's not this guy who knew exactly what his path was and knew exactly what was going on, and starts to have panic attacks, cannot campaign, about a week before the California primary is about to happen. He's in this situation, and and they can't have him go see a therapist because he won't see a therapist without making it public. And so his sister's best friend is this yoga guru and this stress management coach who runs an incense making studio and a yoga studio, and is from this long line of woo-woo yoga people in the Bay Area. And so of course he's sent to her, and they have some history, and he's been engaged, or at least that's what everyone believes, for the past 10 years to another woman. So he's Edward Ferrars. And we're going to explore what actual cheating is. Is it just what you say? Because I believe that in Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, Edward Ferrars cheated. So he wasn't quite the, the gentleman everybody made him out to be, because he put himself in a situation where she falls in love with him, and that's cheating. It's not what you say, it's what you do. And so that's kind of all the stuff that, so of course, here's India, and here's this man, who makes her question everything she believes, because he is with another woman and she's having feelings. And so there's this, that's basically the story, and it is going to be called Incense and Sensibility.
Oh, fun.
Love it. Oh my God, it's so good.
Which
So
my son
good.
came up with when he was in middle school. And when I first thought of these stories, I was like, she's a yoga guru, she makes incense, and this is the original name. And he was like, Mom, Incense and Sensibility.
It's so cute. I love it so much.
I love it.
So
Fantastic, thank you. I can't wait for all of these, so much to look forward to. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We've actually gone a little bit over time. So thank you so much to all three of you. This evening has been a true delight and a pleasure. Thank you so much to
Thank
the
you
audience.
so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Northshire. Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. And come
Thank you
visit
all
in the
for coming.
store
This has been great.
anytime.
Everyone stay
Victoria Street
healthy.
Walk. We'll see you then.
I'll be
And,
spelling books
yes.
at the Victorian Walk this year.
Okay, great. We will see you then. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.